Indiana's really going to have a chance to prove itself on Saturday with one of their two biggest games of the season.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, everybody? It is Friday, December 9th. This is Locked On Hoosiers, your one and only daily one-stop shop for everything IU athletics. I'm your host, as always, Jacob Rude. I want to thank you, as always, for making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. I've used that word prove a lot when talking about IU basketball this season because I think it's an apt word for this team. They're a good team, maybe a great team, but they have to prove that they're a great team. They have to win some of these big games. They have to do it on a national stage. And Saturday offers the latest opportunity to do that. They did that against North Carolina. We'll see how that win holds up. North Carolina has lost 4 straight games. IU the third in that streak. Now, they've all come against top 50 KenPom teams, but that was one level of proving it. These next 2 weeks are going to be another whole level of proving it. Arizona is going to be one of the very toughest tests Indiana has this season. Let's talk about that game, which, as I said, takes place Saturday, 7:30 p.m. in Las Vegas. Shout out to a lot of you that are in Las Vegas. I've seen. I hope some of you took time to listen to us today to get your daily fix for IU sports. If you did, let us know in the YouTube comments. Let us know on review. Let us know on Twitter if you're in Vegas for this one. It will be on Fox for those of you that did not make the trip out west. Gus Johnson calling this game means it's going to be an exciting one. It's an interesting matchup for a number of reasons. This Arizona team is 7-1 on the season, mirroring IU in a lot of ways. They had a non-conference schedule that they breezed through at 6-0. Biggest wins against Cincinnati, San Diego State, and Creighton, all on neutral sites in a tournament. They may have been in the Maui. I'm not 100% certain on that, but they pretty much breeze through non-conference play and then head on the road for their conference opener and lose to Utah. They got thumped. They lost by 15. Stop me if you've heard this before. IU lost by 15 in a game that looks just kind of at their schedule. It looks uncharacteristic to how they've played the rest of the season. They bounced back earlier this week on Sunday with a win at home against Cal, one of the bottom teams in the Pac-12, Pac-10, whatever they're calling themselves nowadays. So that was at the Maui. The Maui Jim Maui Invitational that Arizona won. So this is at least how how their record sits, a very similar Arizona team to IU. They're very different in their play style, though. They're second in adjusted efficiency. They are first in tempo. This is going to be an absolute track meet. And to make matters worse, better, more interesting, Arizona has a lot of athletes that are going to cause a lot of problems. We'll talk more specifics, but second offensive efficiency, first in tempo, third in possession length, first in effective field goal percentage. These guys do not hang on to the ball. They are go, go, go. They're going to this is going to be a fast tempo game. IU, I think, can play that. It's not what they prefer to play, and at times certain guys might get a bit too sped up. Xavier Johnson, one of those that jumps to mind. The guard play is going to be very, very important in this game. But Arizona ranks first in the country in 2-point percentage, 79th in 3-point percentage, 324th in steal percentage. So maybe some turnover issues when it comes to playing that fast a little bit. They also don't really create turnovers. They are 342nd in defensive turnover percentage. They're 65th defensively. They're not a bad team. I think their general thought process is we can just score more than you. They can play defense. I mean, 65th is still good, but they're more focused on getting out and going, running, pushing the tempo. And they're really damn good at that. They've scored over 100 points 3 times this season. One of those against Cincinnati, won 101-93 in Maui. The other 2 came against sub 200 Ken Palm teams. IU's only cleared 100 one time against Bethune-Cookman. There's only been one game that Arizona hasn't scored at least 81 points, and that was that Utah loss. Every other game they've scored 81 points. Now, granted, there's only been 2 games that IU hasn't done it, the North Carolina game and the Rutgers game. The North Carolina game, they had 77 points. We don't need to talk about what happened in that Rutgers game. So I think on paper, there are ways these 2 teams match up really similarly. Statistically, if you look at this, I almost said Rutgers, this Arizona team, they are led, and I jotted these down to try to say them right, as Azuolas Tubelis is their leading scorer at 20.1 points per game, 8.3 rebounds, shooting 61.9% from the field. He is 6'11", 245 pounds. Right beside him, Oumar Ballo, 19.1 points, 9.3 rebounds, 76.9%, 7 foot 260. Good Lord. This is going to be the biggest test for Trayce and Race this season. There aren't many front courts I wouldn't say that they're going to be the clear favorites against. This would be one of them. Trayce, Race, Jordan Geronimo, Malik Renew. If foul trouble becomes a thing, Logan Duncombe might see some time in there. This is going to be one hell of a test for these 2. Now, like I said, on paper, I mean, that's a tough test the other way around too for those guys, for those 2, Tubelis and Ballo, to defend Race, Trayce, Malik. Malik obviously needs to work on foul trouble, which has been something that has plagued him. And I mean, it's a common thing among freshmen, so it's not something out of the ordinary necessarily. But if you look per 40 minutes, Malik is averaging 7 fouls per 40 minutes. So tone that down a little bit. But and he's going to have to in this game. If he gets in foul trouble, it's going to be a nightmare for Indiana. They're going to need him in this contest more than they may need him in any other contest this season. Now, what's going to determine this game, if I don't want to call it a wash in the front court. Arizona might have might have the advantage. I like Indiana matching up against them, but what's going to determine this game are the guards on both sides of the court. For Arizona, that's going to be Kerr Kriisa, who is averaging 12.8 points per game, shooting 40.9% from 3, 46.4% from the field. Courtney Ramey is averaging 13.8 points per game. They are a team, much like Indiana, that sees some fluctuation in their guard play, and that determines a lot for them because, like Indiana, they have big men that can really dominate things and carry you to wins. But if you come into a matchup like this where they can be negated to a certain extent, guard play is what's going to become a big factor. Pele Larson is averaging 9.6 points per game, only shooting 27.3% from 3. Ramey is shooting 50% from 3 on 6 attempts per game. In 5 games, 15 of 30 shooting from 3. Indiana's going to have to be very focused defensively. This is a game Jalen Hood-Schifino is going to have to play in this game. If he does not play, I do not like IU's chances. It's going to be an uphill battle even if he does play. Without him, though, this is going to be very difficult. There's a number of other guys that contribute, but those 6, with Cedric Henderson averaging 9 points per game, shooting 40% from three on 2.5 looks per game. Those 6 are their biggest ones, their biggest contributors. They've played 9 people, all 8 games. So, but those, like I said, those 6, at least statistically, are their biggest contributors. And like I said, this is going to be a game the guards are going to have to show up. In some senses, it's a good thing that Indiana is coming off a game where 2 of their guards had their best games of the season, and Tamar Bates and Trey Galloway, because those 2 are going to need to continue doing that on Saturday. Xavier Johnson is going to need to play completely unlike he played the last 2 games. And then you really need Jalen Hood-Schifino to step up. A number of guys are going to have to play big. Miller Kopp as well. This is going to be as tough of a challenge as Indiana's going to have just roster-wise. This is a really tough Arizona team. It's going to be a fun game, though. I want to play these games. I want Indiana in these games on a national stage against tough opponents in non-conference play. This is where you learn how good of a team you are. This is where you learn how you stack up, what you need to improve upon. And I want to do it now so that things are fixed come Big Ten play, come tourney time. So excited for this one. This should be a fun contest. I'm hopeful. We'll see. It's going to be an uphill battle right now. I would probably favor Arizona. KenPom favors Indiana, but 80-79 with a 54% win probability. So barely favoring Indiana. We'll see how it plays out. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I plan on doing so. BetOnline does not have the odds up for this game yet, though. But for those of you that want to partake in that and aren't in Las Vegas, BetOnline.net, your number one source for your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Let's talk about the women's basketball team who boy, that was not a pretty game they had in Penn State on Thursday night, but they advance. They win. They stay unbeaten. It looked touch and go there for a bit. The first half was one of the first halves I've seen Indiana play under Terry Morin. They average 11 turnovers per game, which is one of the best in the country. The first quarter alone, they had 9 turnovers. The first half, they had 12. Penn State was pressing. They were getting Indiana sped up. They were getting them disorganized. And despite Indiana playing better in the first half in terms of shooting, they shot the ball better. In that first half, Indiana shot 45% from the field to Penn State shooting 32%. Penn State was able to hold the lead at halftime because Indiana could not stop turning the ball over. The difference in the second half, 5 turnovers. Specifically that third quarter, they did not turn the ball over. They come out in the third quarter, win it 22-11. They looked like the Indiana team you expected, composed, getting the ball inside. The first half, Mackenzie Holmes only had 4 field goal attempts. The third quarter, she had 5. So you can bet that was written on the chalkboard, dry erase board, whatever is in that locker room, that was written on there. 3 women scored all of Indiana's points in that third quarter. Holmes with 8, Parrish with 7, Moore McNeil with 7. Fourth quarter, they closed the game out. Didn't really get all that hairy. Penn State tried. They pressed until the very end. They did their best, but Indiana holds on for the victory. Mackenzie Holmes comes away with 18 points to tie for game-high honors with Sydney Parrish. Holmes had 18 points and 10 rebounds on 8 of 12 shooting, was a plus 10 in 35 minutes in this one. It's hard to understate how good she's been, how good she continues to be for Indiana. Big Ten Player of the Year. She's in National Player of the Year conversations. Sydney Parrish continues her strong play, 18 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists in this one. Played 34 minutes and was a plus 14. And then Chloe Moore McNeil and Sarah Scalia both play 39 minutes. Moore McNeil with 11.7 assists, 3 rebounds. Continue to play well, handling the ball. She only had 1 turnover. Sarah Scalia struggled to shoot the ball. She was trying. They were doubling Mackenzie Holmes. Holmes was making some nice skip passes or kicking it out, swing. Scalia getting some open looks, could not knock him down. 3 of 12 overall, 1 of 7 from 3. Still scored 7 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds. Yarden Garzon was in some foul trouble late. It was a tough game for her. She filled up the stat sheet: 7 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 fouls, 6 turnovers, and a steal in 34 minutes. Hey, up and down, a little bit of a wild ride. It worked out in the end. A couple some bench contribution in this one. Henna Sandvik played 12 minutes. I thought played really well, 4 points. She helped close out that game when Garzon fouled out. Lily Meister, Lexus Bargesser saw some first half minutes as well, which is nice to see as they kind of continue to develop. Again, that is 4 freshmen in the rotation in this one between Garzon, Bargesser, Sandvik, Meister. To rely on them as much as Terry Morin is early in the season, or has to, with Grace Berger's injury, it will pay dividends down the road, even if it might not be what she wants to do right now. But ultimately, this was the first game where IU looked a little bit like they missed Grace Berger. That first half would have been when Grace would have taken the ball, took command of things, slowed things down, and gotten Indiana back on track offensively. They never found that in the first half. They were just frazzled and just kind of flying all over the court, not really in any kind of rhythm. They couldn't get the ball down to Holmes. And when they did, they were entry passes that pulled her out of position. So it was just IU wasn't clicking in that first half. And then they went into the locker room. Whatever was said by Terry Morin, it stuck, and Indiana started clicking in the third quarter. So it wasn't the prettiest of wins, but Indiana eventually righted itself and started playing some good basketball that third and fourth quarter to come away with the win. They, as I said, remain unbeaten in both overall and in conference play. I believe they have a pretty lengthy break now because of finals, as everybody kind of does now. They don't play again until December 18th against Morehead State. So there'll be a lengthy break for them. We'll look into them on next week to talk. Mackenzie Holmes and Grace Berger are flying up kind of all-time boards for a number of statistics. So we're going to look into that and talk about where they rank among various things on that next week. But no action for them until next Sunday. Much needed break because that was a tough one they had to gut out on the road on Thursday. Let's finish this up talking about a College Cup game. We didn't get a chance to talk about it before today, but we're going to dive into the IU game against Pitt. First, though, thanks, guys, for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. For the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, wherever you guys listen to your podcast. We'll talk IU men's soccer here in just one moment. IU men's soccer, College Cup, name a more famous duo. The IU loves a College Cup. They're 22nd in 50 years. I can't get over that stat. I've told it to all sorts of friends, whether they follow college soccer or not. That is an absurd stat. That is, that has been in my head for the last week, just how unreal of a stat that is. 22 College Cups in 50 years. Just unprecedented. That in modern college athletics, this isn't the John Wooden UCLA days. Modern college athletics, 22 College Cups in 50 years. unbelievable. But their latest venture to the College Cup is a rematch. Hoosiers taking on a Pittsburgh team they faced about 18 months ago. One that they beat 1-0 in the College Cup back then. I guess technically this is IU's second trip to the College Cup in 2 seasons, because that 2020 season did finish up in 2021. That's when IU beat Pittsburgh in the 1-0. Pittsburgh was number 3 rated at the time. It was Herbert Enderle that got the goal on that night. So second time in 18 months, Indiana has faced Pittsburgh and been in the College Cup. We'll see if they're able to repeat their performance from that one. This is a interesting Pittsburgh team. Came into the season and tournament kind of, not really considered the favorites necessarily. 12-4-5 on the season, 3-2-3 in the conference. They didn't blow anybody away. They go into the tournament as an unseeded team. They beat Cleveland State in the first round. Then they beat 16 seed Akron 3-0, just kind of manhandled them. Their big game, though, Lexington, Kentucky against number 1 Kentucky. They fall behind 1-0. They level the score shortly thereafter. Then they get a red card with about 12 minutes to go on a challenge. I watched the highlights of that. It was an unfortunate red card where the player slipped as he was trying to control the ball, and it ended up being a pretty nasty challenge. It was a harsh red, but had a man sent off. And how does Pitt respond? With a goal in the 87th minute to win the game. It was a game that Kentucky dominated the possession, and yet Pitt had more shots on goal. And I wouldn't be surprised if that might be a similar way this game plays out on Saturday. It's a Pitt team that really struggled with injuries at the beginning of the season, really struggled to find some consistency in their lineups, especially defensively, but they found it. They haven't been quite as much of a wall, I guess, defensively. They've let in goals. The ACC tournament 1-4-1 against NC State in double overtime. Here's some good news that I didn't learn until this weekend, because IU hasn't had to play an overtime game in some time. There's no more golden goal. IU cannot lose on a golden goal this year. Thank you. Whoever it is you believe in, thank them, because heavens, there is nothing worse than losing on a golden goal. So Pitt won 4-1 against NC State in double overtime in the ACC tournament, and then lost to number 3 Virginia. And then they go on this run in the NCAA tournament. Last week, they beat Portland 1-0 on the road. That was at home. So this is a tested Pitt team. Not as many players on this team that played it in the game 18 months ago. IU does have some players and some big contributors. Ryan Wittenbrink, the biggest among them. Daniel Mooney in the back line. Gumbale. There's some other guys. Enderle is still around. So there'll be a number of guys who played in that game, played big roles at times in that game. As we mentioned with Enderle, that will have played in these games, similar to the Marshall game, where it was a lot of the same people that played in that game because those games were in the same College Cup. So we'll see how much, it's not revenge this time, but the familiarity matters. There are a handful of similar opponents. We mentioned that Pitt beat Kentucky 2-1. That was a Kentucky team that came into Bill Armstrong Stadium and kind of smacked around IU. That was a turning point in them for their season. They also played Akron. Akron was a game that we mentioned. They won 3-0 in the second round of the tournament. IU beat them 2-0 at home very early on in the season. And then the other light game was Marshall. I'm finding the score here. Pitt lost to 2-1. And IU beat them 1-0 in a game that Wasn't quite as close as even that score indicates. So this is I would give the slight edge to Indiana, which, I mean, that's why they're ranked, and Pitt might not be. But like I said last week, when you're at this point in the season, everybody's good. Like, this isn't a fluke that Pitt somehow found their way to 4 victories in the NCAA tournament to get to this point. This is a good Pitt team. Indiana's well aware of that. We'll see how things play out. I would give the slight edge to Indiana, but I mean, who would have predicted Pitt to beat Kentucky, especially a man down? If you guys get a chance, go watch the goal that won the game for Pitt against Kentucky. A stunner of a long-range effort against the run of play. That's all it takes. Anything can happen in knockout soccer. For those that are watching the World Cup, you can see how different things can change in a heartbeat or the blink of an eye when it comes to soccer games like that. So optimistic, like I said, that game will be 8:30 on Friday tonight on ESPNU. If Indiana wins that, their game actually won't be till Monday. I thought it was Sunday. We won't have to do a special episode. That game will be on Monday night. So fingers crossed. If Indiana wins, we're talking about that plenty on Monday. If Indiana loses, we'll talk about it, but maybe not the plenty part. That'll do it for today's episode, guys. Like I said, thanks again for making us your first listen every day. We will be back on Monday. We'll talk IU Arizona. We'll talk this men's soccer game. Depending on how those results go will depend on which one we talk about more. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. It's the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps. You guys know the deal. It's available on Odyssey, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you're listening to this podcast at. Appreciate all the love, the support you guys continue to give us. Follow us on Twitter. If you have not already, we'll be live tweeting throughout the weekend at LO_Hoosiers. Subscribe to the podcast, all of that amazing stuff. Most importantly, everybody have a great Friday. Hope your weekend is awesome. Let's go Hoosiers on a number of fronts. And as always, LEO.